The Madman! Welcome to Trump's official rating. And welcome to Trump Reviews for Descent of Dragons. And bonus, also for Galakrond's Awakening. Also worth mentioning is that this expansion has had the most balance changes. They were done so fast in the meta, it would have been really difficult to know whether or not the meta would have settled in a different way, even without the nerfs. So sometimes the ratings changed in my favor, sometimes the ratings changed against my favor. Ultimately, it's what the card rating is at now that matters. And you have Strength in Numbers, which, last but not least, I looked at putting this into the Embiggen Dragon deck. Ooh, good idea. And on average, in that Dragon deck, you were summoning a 4/5 because you had to run a few small cards as well. And 1 mana rewards summon a 4/5 from your deck, like possibly summon something big and waste the battle cry. Meh. Especially since you cannot spend 10 mana on the same turn that you play Strength in Numbers. So that 4/5 you get is always at least 3 turns delayed. Interesting on that Strength in Numbers thing. So 3 turns delay is kind of like Dormant. I ended up under-calculating what it would be because people ended up running that Injured Tolvier card to raise the bar. I may not have included the Embiggen +2/+2. So the numbers ended up bigger, and Strength in Numbers ended up kind of like 1 mana, summon a maybe 5/6 on average. Dormant too. And that's worth it. And that's like an example of how Dormant can be good. The Dragon Druid deck, I'm looking forward to trying it out. I think it's only tier 3, but Breath of Dreams is insane, and Ysera Unleashed is a very strong dragon. But how good can a ramp plan be? And then at tier 2, I think, is Treants. Treants have some really strong synergy, and Garden Gnome from previous was insane. What it just needed was another 5-mana spell. And this is a 5-mana spell that draws you 2 cards for 0 mana as well. So yeah, that's pretty good. That's actually pretty on point for the time that this came out. Of course, you're all well acquainted with Embiggen Druid now, but Winged Guardian only came out with the expansion, Galakrond's Awakening. And before then, Embiggen Druid wasn't that much of a force, so actually I had overrated Embiggen Druid before this expansion even, so you see it all works out. So Embiggen Druid ends up being a tier 2 deck. So that makes Breath of Dreams, Emerald Explorer, Embiggen, and Strength in Numbers. Those cards are all 4 stars. Whereas Token Druid ends up being tier 3. However, it was a little bit stronger near the beginning of the expansion. In this respect, I was at least in the ballpark on both packages. Ysera Unleash ends up being extremely good at 5 stars, used as a finisher in a lot of different druids. Sometimes Embiggen Druid, but especially Quest Druid. Also, Ysera Unleashed is one of those cards that picked up in popularity after the expansion's adventure. And Secure the Deck is accurate at 1 star. Toxic Reinforcements and Phase Stalker, on the other hand, I think don't fit into a deck. Toxic Reinforcements is a 4-turn delay before you can actually attack with the Leopard Gnomes. And in an aggressive deck, you cannot count on a card that's only useful 4 turns later. Very, very strong dragons all around, and Stormhammer ties it all together. All of these cards are 5 stars. By the way, when I rated all those dragons 5 stars, this is an example of where the variance is extremely lucky for me. This was before Mr. 5-mana 6/5 that comes with a Deadly Shot dragon came out, and Dragon Hunter wasn't very good. But now it's awesome! I think that Highlander Hunter changes from the secret package to the dragon package. And not only that, I think it literally runs every card in here other than Toxic Reinforcement and Phase Stalker. Run all the packages, run the Rush package, run the Mini Hero Power package because Dwarven Sharpshooter and Dragonbane are that strong, run the Dragon package, run all the good neutral dragons as well. Almost. For the most part though, this ends up being surprisingly right now. So Highlander Hunter does run every single one of these, except Toxic Reinforcements, and Highlander Hunter is a 5-star deck, a tier 1 deck, with the exception that Varanus, 4 stars, sometimes not run in Highlander Hunter, and also sometimes not run in Dragon Hunter. It's going to be a tier 1 deck for the Dragon Hunter, and I think it's going to be a tier 2 deck for the Highlander Hunter. But even if the Dragon Hunter ends up only being tier 2, you use these cards in both decks, so they deserve the 5-star rating. Yeah, so close, Trump, so close. You are ahead of your time. Dragon Hunter wasn't that good at the time of the review, but because of Galakrond's Awakening, coming up the Rottnest Drake is just ludicrous. Also though, Toxic Reinforcements surprises, and was at a higher rating before the Galakrond's Awakening adventure came out. However, down to 3 stars now, as Face Hunter continues to slink into tier 3 as better decks emerge over it. So for elemental allies, there are so many elementals that you'll want to play, and all you have to do is play 2 of them, and then you draw 3 spells in your deck. You'll notice that I never said, I think in any review, that you have to play 2 elementals in a row. That ended up being a major confusion point for me. The first time I played that deck, I didn't know that when my Elemental Allies quest reset to 0, that I had to play 2 elementals in a row. Wait, 1 out of 2? Oh, play an elemental 2 turns in a row! In a row! 5 stars. Oh! Oh! In hindsight, I probably wouldn't have rated it much lower. I would have just said, that's fine, just play 2 in a row then. So because of that, I think that this Elemental Mage deck is going to be a tier 1 deck. In summation, I think it's here. I think the Cyclone Mage deck, which was a solid deck, hurt by the nerfs, well, when you get this many new cards that you can put into it, and I don't know if you can fit that all into the same deck, but boy, you're gonna try, and if you can pull it off, it's super powerful. So, Mage, I was really hyped about this Learn Draconic and Elemental Allies thing. I think, like, when you look at the cards, they really do look insane. It is 1 mana, get a 6/6, and it is 1 mana, draw 3 spells. And I think this is a little bit of a hint at how powerful Dormant might be. It's just that in practice, it wasn't even 2-turn delay. It was even more delayed than 2 turns. It turns out that the top row, at least, is played in Highlander Mage a lot, and Highlander Mage is a tier 2 deck. Not Azure Explorer as much. Azure Explorer is a card that's not seen as often in that deck. The rest of the cards, unfortunately, Cyclone Mage ended up being a big bust. It just wasn't strong enough. Learn Draconic was a little bit of a surprise to me. I think there weren't that many good spells is the thing. You'll note that Highlander Mage actually doesn't run that many spells in it. Rolling Fireball also ended up being 2 stars because it was tried out and found to be not as powerful as the others. So Mage is definitely the class I most overrated this expansion. In summary, I think Paladin gets a few cards that are really strong for aggro, Sanctuary and Skyclaw, which is good for the Highlander Paladin, as well as it gets a new archetype, Paladin, where Sanctuary and Skyclaw find a great home for, because Paladin, I think, should be built in a aggressive manner. And I think that the Dragon Paladin stuff just won't work out because it's not as strong as other control things. Well, for the most part, this actually looks fairly good. Dragon Paladin ended up not being very strong, and I did look to see that there wasn't going to be enough dragons to put the dragon package into pure Paladin. Bronze Explorer ends up being 2 stars, even though it is an excellent card for mid-range Paladin. Dragon Rider Talritha, not even seeing 2 stars worth of play. 1 star, not even seeing play. Nozdormu, that card that everyone hyped as a 4 mana 8/8 with a upside, to my surprise ends up being 1 star. Like, not too big a surprise since I rated it 2 stars, but I'm a little bit surprised. Amber Watcher, accurately 2 star, and is one of the best aggro stoppers in the game, by the way. Righteous Cause did see enough play to make it to 2 stars. Sand Breath, 1 star is accurate. Where Paladin really takes off is Mech Paladin, and it ends up using none of these cards other than Skyclaw, which ends up being insane in Mech Paladin. I qualified Mech Paladin as a tier 2 deck, but Skyclaw gets the boost up to 5 stars because it's also in pure Paladin. I ended up overrating Sanctuary, 1 star. Just don't take damage is pretty hard. And for pure Paladin, that ends up being a tier 3 deck. I'm looking forward to it being potentially quite a bit better in the next expansion of all the Librams. In summary, for Priest, I think that the only card that we'll see tier 1 play is Mind Flayer Karj. It's a really strong card, and it's well statted and well mana costed at a low mana cost to slot into probably still tier 1 combo priest. I think the other stuff is just a bit too slow, a bit too, how is the way I win as a control priest? So the Galakrond stuff will do okay, probably tier 3. The dragons will probably join it, but maybe not. A little bit of history. Combo priest was pretty strong entering this meta. Mind Flare Karj ends up never getting the right amount of play in it though. It's not quite good enough to put into all versions of that deck, and Combo Priest ends up not being that powerful. So Mind Flare Karj, 2 stars. I was accurately lukewarm about Galakrond for Priest, and it didn't really take off. In fact, it only ends up working because you don't necessarily put it in a control deck, you put it in a Resurrect deck. Galakrond was an addition to the Resurrect Priest at tier 2. But Galakrond was not always in all of the Resurrect Priests. Some decided to use quests. So Galakrond the Unspeakable, 3 stars. Disciple of Galakrond, 2 stars. Time Rip, 3 stars. Fate Weaver, 2 stars. Fate Weaver and Disciple of Galakrond as cards that were tried but found not good enough. Time Rip and Galakrond the Unspeakable as cards that are sometimes in Resurrect Priest. Breath of the Infinite also sees quite a bit of play in Resurrect Priest. That one sees play in all the Resurrect Priests. So 4 stars on Breath of the Infinite, just a strong AoE. And Grave Ruin, I had assessed it as a combo card, but actually it's just a value card potentially on any of the big priest cards. So Grave Ruin ends up being 3 stars. Mirazond was a card that was found to be generally too slow, but still tried out. Sees a little bit more play than the other 2-star cards in this general review, but 2 stars ultimately. And Whispers of Evil, Chrono Breaker, and Envoy of Lazul all actually saw almost enough play to justify them putting in the 2-star range, but they are high 1-star cards. So Priest ends up not being too impressive, but also not having too many cards that just absolutely sucked. And as much as we laughed at Priest this expansion, haha Priest, it had its moments. The reward is you get a Lackey each time, which is generally better than a Priest minion, especially for tempo, but the natural inclination for this deck is to build it control value, right? Because Galakrond himself draws you cards that cost 0 at the end. So my fundamental failure with the assessment of the Galakrond cards were that I saw this as another Value Rogue deck, and Value Rogue has never worked. And I was right, Value Rogue didn't work. But surprisingly, this draw a card Galakrond deck ended up being tempo, and it ends up being very high tempo to draw 4 cards and have them cost 0. Keep in mind, I was rating these cards against the OP, and I do mean OP, Galakrond Warrior and Galakrond Shaman decks. And before those decks got nerfed, Galakrond Rogue was not tier 1. That said, of course, everyone knows that currently Galakrond the Nightmare, Praise Galakrond, and Seal Fate are 5 stars. Umbral Skulker, 3 stars. So in summary, is this the time for a Value Rogue to rise? No, I don't think so. Not with Galakrond, not with Dragons. But where I do think a Rogue deck will rise will be Tempo Rogue, with that Necroom Apothecary, and Flick Skyshiv will fit in there too. Yes, true. So, do you see that 4-mana Necroom Apothecary? That was disgusting. And I am going to add one thing. Because of that Death Rattle package, most people did not find the room to put Galakrond the Nightmare into their deck. There was a Death Rattle Rogue deck. You ran the Anka, you ran the Apothecary, and you put in the other stuff, and there was not room for the Galakrond stuff. And you ran Highlander because Zephyrus and Alexstrasza are really strong, and Highlander Galakrond is not necessarily as strong because, you only put in one of each Galakrond card. That said, Necroom Apothecary and Flick Skyshiv, 5 stars. Necroom Apothecary, of course, was so powerful that it had to get nerfed. Highlander Rogue ends up also playing Galakrond, but also some of the lesser cards here. So Bloodsail Flybooter and Dragon Sword, 4 stars. Seeing play in the Highland version, but not good enough to see play in the main Galakrond version. Campbell Breath surprisingly saw enough play, probably just because Rogue saw a lot of play, to make it to 2 stars. Waxadread, though, didn't quite see enough play to make it to 2 stars. It was 1 star. Stowaway also 1 star. Okay, prepare for the most ridiculous cards you've seen. You know that quite a number of these cards got changed. The Galakrond decks for these classes ended up being insane. Shaman also has a Galakrond, and I think that this is the best Galakrond out of all the Galakronds. What makes, I believe, the Shaman Galakrond so good is that... Thank you for that, Trump. That was absolutely right. In fact, Galakrond warped the entire meta and was so good that it had to get nerfed, I think, 2 different times, or was it 3 different times? So in summary, I think that Shaman gets a great new way to still be in the lead with Quest Shaman. Add the Galakrond package to Quest Shaman. It'll be a bit of refining on whether or not Invocation of Frost makes the cut, and whether or not maybe you run the 4-mana 2/2 Rush Invoke card just to try to get turn 5 Dragons pack to follow up. Yeah, a lot of interesting things. I think ultimately just the sheer power of these Battlecry cards are going to do well with the Quest Shaman. Dragon Shaman does get an amazing Lightning Breath, but ultimately I think Control Shaman takes second fiddle to the better Shaman, Galakrond Quest Shaman. And then of course there's the complete different direction you can take Shaman, which is aggressive. You're gonna smack people with your Surging Tempest, you're gonna fill the board, you're gonna Storm's Wrath them, you're gonna finish them off with Cumulo Maximus. It's gonna hurt. So yeah, I did at least correctly identify that Galakrond Shaman was going to be what I thought to be the strongest deck in the meta. The exact way that it was going to work, I did get wrong. I thought it was going to be a Quest Galakrond Shaman, and indeed at the opening stages, there was a split. Like some people went Quest, some went Galakrond, and then it was decided that the pure Galakrond version was better. In that top row of cards, the 3 activators all got nerfed. So Invocation of Frost, Corrupt Elementalist, and Dragon's Pack all get 5 stars. Invocation of Frost, I originally looked at the Corrupt Elementalist and I was like, oh, that's enough invoking. I don't really need to run Invocation of Frost maybe. But it turns out that running Invocation of Frost, and indeed the Rush Devoted Maniac card, which didn't look too exciting at the time, was really good to get out your Dragon's Pack on turn 5, which was insane when it summoned 2 5/6s. As expected, Control Shaman didn't amount to much, but looks like I even overrated it. Look at that Lightning Breath card. Would anyone have possibly expected 3-mana Flame Strike to end up being 1 star? That's a really strong AoE to get rid of Magtheridon's 1/3s, by the way. A deck that is certainly not great, but is almost tier 3-ish. It's so close, I'm gonna give the tier 3 status, is Aggro Shaman. And Aggro Overload Shaman, does run Storm's Wrath and Surging Tempest, so those are both 3 stars. And shockingly to me, Cumulo Maximus is not good enough to put into that deck. Cumulo Maximus did see enough experimentation to make it into 2 stars, but not actually played in Aggro Overload Shaman, when I thought it would be one of the best cards of this set. This reminds me a bit of when Knights of the Frozen Throne came out and Warlock got a bunch of good cards, including Defile, and I famously rated Defile 1 star, saying that a Control Warlock deck isn't good, and it ended up being like almost tier 3. In a similar way, I think that there are really good Warlock cards here, but I feel like that isn't enough to push the Control Warlock archetype, along with all the other cards even. So I think that's going to be a nice tier 3 deck, and we're going to wait for another Kobolds and Catacombs to push Control Warlock into an insane deck. For Fiendish Rites, I'm going to mention that it was nerfed to 4 mana, and that is the one card that I'm not sure needed to be nerfed. But because it was nerfed, and it might have been necessary, it's hard to say though, 5 stars Fiendish Rites. The rest of the package for Zoo, it never really took off much past the tier 3 deck. Some of this Galakrond package ends up seeing play in the Handlock version, or the Control version. That's where Veiled Worshipper saw most of the play. Speaking of the Handlock, all the bottom 6 cards ends up seeing play in a tier 3 Handlock deck. Zeraku the Warped is sometimes in that deck, not enough to give it the 3-star status, so Zeraku 2 stars, and Rain of Fire does indeed suck 1 star. I think Warrior has the second best Galakrond, in that this will create an archetype. Well, not necessarily create, but just change an archetype. In summary, I think Warriors get a lot of cool toys. There's a new archetype, Pirate Warrior, it's back. I don't think it's quite as good as it used to be, but can high roll. as it did in the dev showcase stream. It's got the Galakrond archetype, which is, of course, set to be an aggressive deck. I think Aggro Warrior takes the Galakrond stuff and fits it in. And that's going to be good Warrior stuff. Yeah, so Galakrond Warrior ends up being one of the better decks of the expansion. All 4 of those cards at the top are all 5 stars. Note that Scion of Ruin was nerfed from 3 to 4 mana. I will mention that Galakrond Warrior did take 2 different branches back when Scion of Ruin was only 3 mana. You could afford to run Dragon Breeder just to bump Scion of Ruin back to your hand, and in that way it became more of a mid-rangey value deck. The current Galakrond, though, is much more in-your-face and tempo-y. For the pirate-related stuff, Ankar did get nerfed with a full durability loss. So because of that nerf, I am going to give Ankar a 5-star. I'm going to mention that the Ankar nerf, though, wasn't necessarily because Pirate Warrior was too strong, but because Ankar specifically was too powerful. And when you drew Ankar on 3, it just felt bad and created a bad gaming experience, even if the entire Pirate Warrior deck didn't end up being tier 1. Still, Ankar got nerfed. Unfortunately, with Ankar's nerf, many of the pirates end up also being substantially worse. Whereas I had originally underrated the cards because it might have been a tier 2 deck initially, now they've been nerfed to basically tier 4 status. So Sky Raider, Sky Barge, Ankar, those are all 2 stars. Ramming Speed and Molten Breath see some fringe play in Highlander decks or some Dragon Warrior decks. Warrior is a pretty popular class, so a number of these not even that powerful cards saw enough experimentation. So 2 stars for those as well. Evil Quartermaster was much more powerful before the expansion's Bomb Lady took its place. Evil Quartermaster ends up being just 3 stars now as a very rarely used option in a number of Warrior decks. Deathwing Mad Aspect ends up being 3 stars as well. Originally, a decent enough dragon to put into the Galakrond Dragon package back when you were running Dragon Breeder as well as Scion of Ruin. But after that, where Deathwing might have been a 4-star, it has been dropped down to 3. And we're going to start with a surprising one. Depth Charge, 1 star. It was actually not too surprising. Yes, 1 star. It was no Doomsayer. Hot Air Balloon, 1 star. Doesn't grow fast enough. It's a 1-2. But it turned out that Mech Paladin really wanted a 1-drop. Given that Mech Paladin is tier 2, 4 stars. Evasive Chimera, 1 star. 1 star. It's a 2-1 for 2. Grizzled Wizard, 1 star. 1 star. You can't aim it against anyone in this meta. Tasty Flyfish, 1 star. I don't think there's enough room to build a Murloc Dragon deck. Tasty Flyfish ends up seeing enough play to make it the 2 stars. It was never in any serious decks, but given its neutral status and given how many dragons were in the meta, you actually saw Tasty Flyfishes running around here and there. Transmorgifier, 1 star. 1 star. It's just a 2-mana 2/3 with a nonsense ability. Wormers Purifier, 1 star. 1 star. No, I don't think you should run it. Blowtorch Saboteur, 1 star. 1 star. 3-mana 3/4 with a minor ability just doesn't cut it. Dreadraven, 1 star. 1 star. I think it's a meme. Firehawk, 1 star. I am going to say I think this one's dangerous because if you're going first and you Elemental Invocation out Firehawk, it's going to be a 6/3 on turn 1. And that is a huge high roll. I'm also going to special mention that I saw at least one of the casters that I follow rate this as their top 3 cards of most powerful in Descent of Dragons, showing how it's easy to have pet favorites and potentially get some card stars incorrect. Gobble Glide Tech, 1 star. I'm a little bit afraid of this one too. Mech Paladin looks to have a strong opening, but I think you should just run Paladin instead of Mech Paladin. Gobble Glide Tech ends up being 4 stars. This is without the advanced knowledge that we were going to get shot bot in Galakrond's Awakening. Living Dragon Breath, 1 star. It's a 3-mana 3. 1 star, but I will mention that this card was actually played at the Masters because it was expected that a lot of people would run Highlander Mage, and Highlander Mage had a decent number of frozen cards. So you run some Living Dragon Breath, and that 3-mana 3/4 attack was pretty good against Frost Nova and Blizzard. Hippogriff, 1 star. It's nice that they buffed Stegodon with Rush. It's still not quite good. 1 star. It is pretty good with Dire Frenzy, but I think that's also not good enough, even with the card that fetches Rush cards. Soldrak, Ritualist, 1 star. That is
1
just
star.
too big a downside.
I'm using versus
Chromatic
red.
Egg, 1 star.
1 star.
That is way too expensive of an egg. It's too slow. Plate Breaker, 1 star.
1
This
star.
is not the meta where destroying your opponent's armor is going to matter. You can't afford to run a 5-mana 5/5 with all these aggro decks running around. Skyfin, 1 star. Again,
1
I
star.
think it's pretty hard to run a Dragon Murloc deck. Tentacle Menace, 1 star. Basically
1 star.
a symmetric effect.
Who?
You get a 5-mana 6/5. Very minor meddling. Camouflage Dirigible, 1 star.
1
Don't
star.
think this is relevant right now. Gyrocopter. It's like Tiamat, except you have to choose one of the less popular options. Actually 2 stars as a card that saw just enough play. Tried out in Mech Paladin that it made it to 2. Foot Guard, Grapple Sniper. I doubt you can put
1
enough
star.
dragons in this
What a
to
terrible
make the
card.
symmetrical effect good enough for you without having your deck suck. 1 star. Evasive Draconid, 1 star. This one was a little bit tough too, but I think there are better dragons than to run just a 7-mana 7/7 taunt with can't be targeted. 3 stars. Not really seen in many of the major decks right now, but it was a tech option in Control Warlock, and it is not that popular in a Big and Druid, but sometimes. Blazing Battle Mage, 3 stars. People looked at this 1-mana 2/2 and were like, whoa, that used to be class only. But you know what? I think it's fine as neutral. I actually couldn't find very many decks that would run this card. Maybe Zoo. Well, 5 stars. Just there weren't that many 1-mana plays, so Highlander decks that were aggressive often ended up running it, and aggressive decks often ended up running it. Dragon Breeder, 4 stars. I think a variety of dragon decks are going to want this nice card advantage machine. There are so many great targets to target with Dragon Breeder, so you might see Highlander decks run it, you might see Dragon Focus decks run it. Gets you some really sweet cards. This card was actually correctly assessed at 4 stars. However, it is currently 2 stars. You would use it for Scion of Ruin. However, with Scion of Ruin's nerf, Dragon Breeder also fell to obscurity. Parachute Brigand, 3 stars. I think it's going to see play in Pirate Warrior. Yep, Pirate Warrior. Unfortunately, Pirate Warrior was nerfed. Pirate Warrior used to be a tier 2 deck. However, now it's obscure, so 2 stars. Bad Luck Albatross, 2 stars. I'd originally thought that it might be a pretty solid filler for mid-range decks that expected the game to go longer.
We're so close past Trump.
Expected the game to go longer. But the Albatross just got outpowered. Bad luck. So funny story about the Albatross. This is one of the cards that I actually had at 5 stars originally. Like, I go through a lot of iterations of ratings for every single card, and over time, I'm like, okay, fine, 3 mana, 4/3. Who's gonna run that? Well, it turns out to be 5 stars because it is good enough to run in a variety of Highlander decks, and Highlander decks exist, so it's pretty good to shuffle 2 Albatrosses into their deck. Scale Rider, 5 stars, a major force in drawing people into running dragons. Yeah, 5 stars. Not much to say about that. It's a good force for dragons. Devoted Maniac, 2 stars. It's clearly on paper the weakest Invoke card, but I think it's going to see enough experimentation across all of the Galakrond decks, like maybe you want the extra cards. But furthermore, it could legitimately see play in the Galakrond Shaman deck, because Galakrond Shaman has a lot of cards that cost 5. Maybe you don't want to run the 5-mana Invoke card. Maybe you run the worst 4-mana card. Maybe you then get to curve into the 5-mana Invoke Lover and summon 2 5/6s. Devoted Maniac ends up being 5 stars. You end up actually running all of them, and this is probably the weakest one, indeed. It just turns out to be really good to invoke Galakrond. Dragon Maul Poacher. This is one of the most impactful tech cards of all time. Imagine releasing a card which becomes a 4-mana 8/8 rush if your opponent plays kind of the point of this expansion with dragons. So this card is actually going to majorly impact how dragon decks are built and if they're run. Actually correct! Dragons and Dragon Maul Poacher's popularity ebbed and flowed during the entire expansion. So Dragon Maul Poacher, given the amount of play that it saw across the number of decks, 5 stars. It may surprise you, but I looked up the data, and this card was in 15% of decks, and that is a lot of decks. Definitely enough to warrant the 5-star rating. Evasive Feywing. This is a great aggressively statted dragon for any aggressive or mid-range deck that needs dragons in it. Yep, 5 stars, Dragon Hunter, and Big and Druid, just to name a few. Energy. Frizzkindle Roost, 3 stars. I wouldn't be surprised if this rating was like even too high. This is severely overrated. You need at least 10 dragons in your deck for Frizz to be good, or a card drawing machine, and I don't at the time of the rating, correct? However, Embiggen Druid ended up being far more popular. 4 stars. Horde Pillager, 3 stars. I think this works well in Pirate Warrior. 2 stars. I will mention it was 4 stars before the Inkheart nerf. Troll Batrider, 2 stars. It is a flanking strike. 2 stars, saw just enough experimentation to push it there. 1 star. Fun fact, this was really funny with Topsy Turvy. Big ol' whelp. 5 stars. Yep, 5 stars. Major reason. If you ran dragons, you usually ran Big ol' whelp. Cobalt Spellkin. 5 stars. Similar to Big ol' whelp, except a little bit more selective. 4 stars because Cobalt Spellkin similarly sees play across a number of tier 3 decks. Faceless Sculptor, 5 stars. Fantastic when you put this on a 1/1. We got to experience 5 attack Faceless Sculptor for only a small amount of the meta, but boy was that really good. 5 stars. You'll probably be familiar with the 5 mana 4/4 version now, which is still 5 stars, by the way. Cobalt Sticky Finger, 2 stars. Nope, 1 star. Shield of Galakrond, 5 stars. I think most Galakrond decks are going to run 2 copies of it. Yup, and in fact, that's even an accurate statement because Galakrond Priest does not run 2 copies of Shield of Galakrond. 5 stars, most Galakrond decks run Shield of Galakrond, 2 copies. Evasive Worm, 5 stars. I think that the neutral dragon package is going to very consistently be Big ol' Whelp, Cobalt Spellkin, and Evasive Worm. You know, surprisingly, the neutral package is not even that at all. You only really see Evasive Worm and Big ol' Whelp in Embiggen Druid. Other than that, you don't often see Evasive Worm and Big ol' Whelp in many of the same decks. So yes, 5 stars. It's running Embiggen Druid, especially good when you get it off of your quest. Strength in numbering out a 5/3 Divine Shield Rush is absolutely gross. But you also saw it in a variety of decks that ran dragons here and there. Kronk's Dragon Hook, 5 stars. Are you running a Galakrond deck? Put Kronks in. It's really good. Yes. Shuma, 2 stars. Barely fit its way here, but it could fit into a deck with Bloodlust. Could fit into Quest Hunter. Yeah, this card actually is 2 stars. It's not popular enough to actually consistently be run in Quest Hunter or Token Druid. Twin Tyrant, 3 stars. It's a strong control dragon option. For 2 stars, ends up being a bit too slow. Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, 5 stars. You definitely just put it into every Highlander deck. You maybe put it into Quest Druid, alongside your Zephyrus, alongside your Elise. Yes, 5 stars. And in fact, the 5 star is a little bit of an understatement. Alexstrasza ends up being so powerful that it is legitimate to make nearly any class have a Highlander deck just so you can run Alexstrasza and Zephyrus. Worth mentioning is that this card did get nerfed so that it couldn't generate extra copies of Dragon Queen Alexstrasza, which, yes, was disgusting. Sathravar, we get to already judge how well it's doing, but probably 3 stars still. It's good in the Holy Wrath deck with copying Shrivala, and it's good when you want mega value. 2 stars, Sathravar is used in exactly Holy Wrath Paladin, and Holy Wrath Paladin basically fell off a cliff. The Galakrond's Awakening cards were a lot easier to review because you reviewed a very small number of cards going into obviously existing decks already. Winged Guardian, coming out week 1, and it's already making a little bit of a splash in Embiggen Druid. There's also the possibility of the Beast Druids. Nice hand gesture there, Trump, I agree. 4 stars is correct for that Embiggen Druid tier 2. There were subsects of it that did run Witching Hour just to get your Winged Guardian resurrected as well. This is the card that really popularized Embiggen Druid. Rising Winds, 5 stars. The more I think about this card, the more I compare it to Firefly. It's a 3/2 that gets you a 3/2. Yes, and in fact, people were actually seriously sleeping on this card, but this card single-handedly took Quest Druid to tier 1. And I think you should keep an eye on this card on decks that aren't just Quest Druid in the future. And finally, we have Steel Beetle. I'm going to give 3 stars. This is the card that's going to make Druid probably the best anti-aggro deck, alongside Winged Guardian. Yes, Steel Beetle is 3 stars. Tech option in a number of Druid decks that wanted to be more defensive against aggro when aggro came around. Fresh Scent, 4 stars. This card was so good in Priest that they had to nerf it to 3 mana, and now it's back. It can only target beasts, but there are a lot of good beasts in Hunter. It's certainly a card that boosts the power level of that deck. Well, that might be true. Sadly, Fresh Scent never took off because, unfortunately, it doesn't target dragons. Chop Shop Copter, 1 star. I don't really see this as being synergetic. Yes, it turns out Chop Shop Copter doesn't synergize with dragons, and even if it did, it would still suck. And we have Rotnest Drake, 5 stars. What a beast of a dragon. 5 mana, 6/5. What a dragon of a deadly shot. Like, are you kidding me? Like, when I first saw this card, I was like, are you kidding me? And now that, I mean, every single day when you play against dragon hunters, I think when they play Rotnest Drake, you still die a little bit inside because that's absolutely gross. So this card pretty much single-handedly brought Dragon Hunter into tier 1. Animated Avalanche. It's a big elemental that just summons another big elemental. It's 7 mana for 14/12 in stats. Pretty good, but not quite good enough. 2 stars, saw a bit of experimentation. Apparently, even though I was much less enthusiastic about Elemental Mage, I still had too much enthusiasm for it. Arcane Amplifier. Well-stated elemental that is a constant threat, basically has taunt. If it doesn't die, your hero power does an insane thing. You play it with elemental allies, you play it with elemental evocation, you have your happy little elemental package. Maybe you put the elemental package into a Highlander Mage deck, maybe you put the elemental and a dragon package into elemental dragon Highlander. And you know me, I rated that elemental allies card really powerful, and I was like, oh man, they're finally giving it the support. Sadly, it still wasn't enough support. Elemental Mage ends up being like tier 4-ish, and some of the Reno decks do run this card, so 3 stars. The amazing Reno. Make all minions disappear. Poof. Basically, Plague of Death effect. And I think casting a random spell is worth about 1 to 2 mana. So you're generating 1 to 2 mana value every turn. Pretty accurate analysis. 4 stars. Highlander Mage is tier 2. It probably is overplayed on the ladder, partly because it's quite a fun deck. And Amazing Reno brings on the fun. Team Paladin got Air Raid on week 1. Air Raid, 1 star card. Paladin is on the decline, and Mech Paladin I don't think can actually slot in Air Raid when I really think about it. Ultimately ended up being a bit weak, but saw enough experimentation to make it into 2-star range. Shotbot, which I'm going to give 5 stars, because I think with Shotbot, Mech Paladin has a very reasonable chance of becoming tier 1. You curve the Shotbot into the Skyclaw, and that's great. That is great. It was because of this card that Mech Paladin got a much needed boost. Tier 1, tier 2, debatable. However, Shotbot still ends up being 5 stars because it's in both Mech Paladin and pretty much every other Paladin deck. Scale Lord, 1 star. It's not happening, I think. 1 star. It didn't happen. Prophecy, 1 star. Dark Prophecy actually could see a little bit of play in Combo Priest, but I think just not quite good enough to make the cut there. 1 star, Priest. Cleric of Scales, 1 star. Like, if you could guarantee getting a spell by a certain turn, would Priest be OP? And the answer I came up with is no. 1 star, Priest. And Aeon Reaver is good, but it's not going to push Dragon Priest to be good enough. Yep, Priest, 1 star. But the combination, all 3 of those cards, I think they have a very real chance of seeing play in Highlander Priest, which is substantially beefed up in the next expansion, so look forward to these cards actually seeing play. Rogue's card, week 1, is Shadow Sculptor. I'm going to give that a 2 star. It feels like Shadow Sculptor could be really good in Galakrond Rogue. 1 star, this was a meme. Value Rogue, it didn't work. Skyvateer, 1 star. This card just doesn't currently fit in any rogue deck. It's below the power level. I still think that, and indeed 2 stars. There was a time where a number of people experimented with this card, but it has exited play from the popular decks. With the new stealth buffs, that is a prime time for Skyvateer to perhaps make it back into a rogue stealth package. Blackmancy, 1 star. I started to browse through the list of Battlecry minions. And I'll finish the sentence, the Battlecry minion list is really big. And they kind of suck. 1 star. Eye of the Storm, out week 1. I'm gonna give that a 1 star. It's 13 mana for 15, 18 in stats. If you're paying 10 mana for this and they deal with it on their turn, you get a handicap on the next turn. Fist of Rodden goes with the Eye of the Storm, I suppose. But even if you're summoning a 10 cost legendary, that's not necessarily that great. And then finally there's Explosive Evolution. I'm gonna give that a 1 star as well. I think you simply run Mutate. Maybe after Mutate rotates out, Explosive Evolution might get a chance to shine. 1 star, and I will also say that the reason why Bamboozle, which is a slow Explosive Evolution, is looked upon better, is 1, the Rogue decks are actually good, as opposed to Shaman. 2, Rogue has high mana cost cards with low stat values. Twisted Knowledge, 1 star. It's Warlock cards, and boy does Control Warlock not want a lot of Zoo type cards. There's a lot of trash out there. Yep, 1 star. Something I'll have to look back into in the new set though. Fiendish Servant, 4 stars. I think that Fiendish Servant is great in Zoo. Unfortunately, I was wrong. Was not played in Zoo, and that's the only deck that would consider it 1 star. And Chaos Gazer, 5 stars. Good in all types of Warlock, I think, but often will make your opponent change the plans in order to actually play the card that you've corrupted. Unfortunately, the disruption wasn't good enough. 1 star, probably, well, that is the most overrated card that I had this particular adventure. Bomb Wrangler, 5 stars. It's generally replacing the Quartermaster right now as your 3 mana 2/3 of choice. Yep, that's exactly right, 5 stars. I actually got to review this card pretty much as the card had already replaced Quartermaster, so that's why it's so accurate. Boom Squad, 1 star. Yep, 1 star. Paying 1 mana to get a bad card is just not a good deal. And Risky Skipper, 1 star. I don't think that Warrior really wants a minion-based activator to deal damage to all minions. I don't think the self-damage Warrior is really there right now, and I don't think this is an engine that they really want. Well, this is the most underrated card that I have of the bunch. 5 stars. Alongside Bomb Wrangler, it just turns out that 1 damage to all minions was really good. You cleared their stuff. You activated your stuff to get more bombs, to draw cards with Acolyte of Pain. She's great. Licensed Adventurer, 1 star. Released week 1, doesn't really seem to be much of an impact. 4 stars. Good in precisely Quest Hunter. Sky General Crag right now. That's a pretty good card if you have played a quest. I think Sky General Crag is going to see play in Quest Hunter for sure. And I think that might be the only deck it'll see. Precisely. Quest Hunter. 4 stars. Skydiving Instructor. 2 stars. The deck that I see this most in would be Zoo. Zoo's got a number of 1-cost minions, which would make this card pretty efficient when you played it. 1 star, just wasn't a reasonable combo with it. Escaped Mana Saber, 4 stars. I see this as a generally good card that should see play in a number of decks. Highlander decks most likely. Yeah, 5 stars. I think people ended up being surprised, slightly surprised by how good it was. Sees play in a number of Highlander decks, especially Highlander Mage. This will continue to be a major option for Highlander type decks for the next year. Frenzied Fellwing, 5 stars. This is the card most people are murmuring about. Hopefully Blizzard gave the free 3/3 proper testing. Good news, they did give it proper testing. I don't think it ended up being too disgusting, but still 5 stars. I think that the main deck this ended up in is a little bit of a surprise. Dragon Hunter, deck that could discount it with a steady shot, and a deck that not necessarily did the damage super fast, but got there with damage. Grand Lackey Urk, 3 stars. There are 2 main decks that can run the Grand Lackey Urk. First one is the Galakrond Rogue deck. That's pretty sweet. The main downside is the more lackeys you play, the more board space you need. And Tempo Rogue generally wants to be the one on the board. They don't want to be playing from 0 cards on the board. Other possibility is some sort of Warlock deck, perhaps of Tekkan. So yes, those were the main options where it was explored in. Galakrond Rogue didn't really need the value, and Lackey Warlock ended up being a bit too slow and a bit too unnecessarily high value. 2 stars. Boom Pistol Bully, 5 stars. This card, I think, goes into every single Highlander deck, and I think it goes into a number of decks that just want to add a card to fill. Mid-range decks, namely. because this card interferes with a lot of plays from Galakrond Rogue. Exactly. Galakrond Rogue is one of the major contenders right now, so similar to Dragon Ball Poacher, though this is a tech card, it is a widespread enough tech card to deserve its 5-star rating. And finally, Hellbringer, Pack Filler 1-star. And finally, Lol Hellbringer 1-star. Okay, that does bring us to the conclusion of Trump Reviews, Descent of Dragons, and Galakrond's Awakening. Really, really strong set. So strong that Blizzard took unprecedented efforts to nerf certain cards early. Good for them, being able to push the envelope and also correct their mistakes in a quick manner. Looking forward to the next time we revisit Trump Reviews with Ashes of Outland.